Kevin McCarthy received a verbal smackdown from Congresswoman Liz Cheney for threatening to limit military aid to Ukraine if Republicans take back the House in November. The House Minority Leader told Punchbowl News, "I think people are going to be sitting in a recession and they're not going to want to write a blank check to Ukraine." It is Mark Twain who once said, "History never repeats itself, but it often does rhyme." And what McCarthy's saying here sure sounds like something that we've heard before in U.S. history, specifically in the 1930s, when fascism was on the rise across the globe. Back then, the U.S. had its original America First movement centered around opposition to our country getting involved in World War II in any capacity, even by sending aid. The original America Firsters wanted the U.S. to just live with Hitler. Some even supported him and aligned with the Nazis' hatred of Jews. Among those leading the charge were Charles Lindbergh, radio host Father Charles Coughlin, and automobile industrialist Henry Ford. And their ideas were supported by sitting members of Congress, like Senator Ernest Lundeen, as my friend and colleague Rachel Maddow points out in her amazing new podcast, Ultra.
Fellow Americans, America prepares to take the last step before entering another world war. I call upon the youth of America to put a stop to these un-American, pro-European doctrines. The people should make known their protest. Write your congressmen and senators. Telephone them. Wire them. Come to Washington to see them. You must do this now. Immediate protest will block the way to militarizing our nation.
And joining me now is my friend and colleague, the great Rachel Maddow, host of The Rachel Maddow Show and the new MSNBC original podcast series, Ultra. And Rachel, I have to tell you, I really think that your focus group for everything you do is just me. It's just like, what is Joy obsessed with? Oh, I'm going to make a whole podcast about it. I am so obsessed with this era, and I am so glad that you made this, because I do feel like this is history rhyming. The America First piece, the anti-Semitism that we're seeing from Trump and people like Kanye, the whole vibe of this America First movement feels the same. And this episode that we're going to previewing tonight, it talks about one of the elected officials who was a part of it, and his name is Ernest Lundeen. I want to let you set it up, but I want you to also tell me why you wanted to do this particular era.
First of all, thank you for setting it up like that. That was awesome. And it's great to hear Lundeen's voice on television. I'm not sure that Ernest Lundeen's voice has ever been played on television before. That part where he says, "Wire them," like in that weird 40s accent, it's so great to hear. I mean, it's terrible, but it's also great to hear. And in terms of the resonance and you being my focus group, man, it is you and I both. You and I are a little bit attached at the brain on these things. And I keep telling people, this is about sedition, and in fact, a big sedition trial. And we've got the Oath Keepers on trial for seditious conspiracy right now. We've got the Proud Boys seditious conspiracy trial that's going to start before the end of the year. And in addition, this is the predecessor to that. The podcast in the final episodes of this season is about the Great Sedition Trial of 1944, where there's more than 24 people on trial for seditious conspiracy. They're charged not only with trying to overthrow the government by force, a la January 6th, but being hooked up with the Hitler government while they did it. And so it's about sedition, which we're confronting now. It's about authoritarianism and fascism in the United States, which we are confronting now. I will tell you, though, like the other piece of it, which I also feel like you and I are of the same mind about, is that it's about there being really, really, really terrible members of Congress. You know what I mean? Like, we think that we've got as bad as they get, and there couldn't be a worse bunch. But Ernest Lundeen. The podcast opens with Ernest Lundeen dying in a plane crash, in a very mysterious plane crash that stays mysterious. And what emerges is that he's involved in a plot with an agent from Hitler's government. And that's kind of where we left the story of Ernest Lundeen at the beginning of the podcast. But as we head into this next episode that's going to drop on Monday, you get to meet Ernest Lundeen's widow, his wife who was left behind when he died. And you get to hear her trying to explain away everything that he did, saying he definitely wasn't a Nazi. All this stuff that you guys are saying about him seeming like a Nazi totally isn't true. It's all just a big misunderstanding. And so we have a little sound from the senator, but I wanted to give to you. Nobody else has ever heard this. The sound from Senator Lundeen's widow. So here it is.
Fabulous. All right, roll them.
A number of photographs of my husband were taken while he was speaking. One of those photographs was taken at such an angle as to convey the impression that my husband was standing beneath the swastika. As a matter of fact, he was standing under the stars and stripes. I have beside me 4 photographs proving the truth of my statement.
And as Chris Hayes would have said, dun, dun, dun.
But she's like, you think you've seen a photo of him standing underneath the swastika banner? I'm sure he didn't. Well, here's the photo of him. I mean, like,
hello. Hi-oh. I mean, and I don't know which is sort of richer, that old American accent where everybody talked like this back in the, like, so that's part of it. But I mean, you're right. And it is the denial of reality that you can see, to me, is the other thing that is resonant between that era and this one. Because if you had put Henry Ford or Lindbergh on TV at that time, they would have denied absolutely that they were pro the Nazi government. But it's like the denial of reality that you can see and the determination to sedition. It feels so parallel to today.
And we talk ourselves into this idea that there's something magic about like Facebook or social media, which has allowed people to create an alternate reality where the facts don't count and you can deny reality and everybody gets to live in their own bubble. You know what? I'm sorry. Norma Lundin in February 1941 was on the radio in a nationwide broadcast being like, don't believe your lying eyes. That didn't really happen. I mean, they didn't, that was not thanks to Twitter. Like we have had confrontations with authoritarianism and fascism in this country before. They are often fought in fights that involve very powerful, politically connected people on the wrong side of that fight. And they're often fought in what feels like a post-truth environment where people deny that they're doing the things that they're doing. The worst people among us aren't at all having any compunction about lying. And people who do have compunction about lying are therefore at a disadvantage in debate. And so I just feel like, to me, I know it's a depressing subject matter. Like, forgive me, if the FBI isn't investigating me based on the things that I have in terms of used books over the last year, they need to get back to work. But it's a depressing topic, but I also feel like it's heartening to me because I hear too much defeatism from people in our generation. Like, oh, this is so terrible and there's no way to fight it and it's a juggernaut. No, we have fought this stuff in the past in almost the exact same.
And the thing that actually does scare me is that the thing that if you go back and you look at that era, what finally kind of wrests America out of its America First sort of bubble that we can let Hitler be is, number one, an attack on the United States, right? That brings the country together but also the moral authority that FDR was able to wield and that presidents could wield in that era. The thing that is different between then and now is that it's hard to imagine any president of the United States in this hyper-partisan era being able to wield the kind of moral authority or bring the country together under that authority to reverse this push toward fascism. I think that's probably what scares me, at least more than anything else.
Although when you look back at the hostility to Roosevelt, it reminds me nothing so much as the hostility. It reminds me of nothing so much as the insane, hysterical hatred of Barack Obama.
Very true.
I mean, the anti-Roosevelt forces in this country in the lead up to the 1940 election literally included a group of well-connected, well-off, well-funded Americans, very high-resource, high-capability Americans who were planning in the immediate aftermath of the 1940 election to have 13-man cells all around the country launch violent attacks that would set off a violent revolution in this country. And they figured enough Americans would be dissatisfied with Roosevelt winning re-election that people would rise up and join it. I mean, that was happening. Henry Ford was the most prominent industrialist in the country. Charles Lindbergh was the most famous person in the country not named President Roosevelt. All of the titans of industry were part of the America First movement, which was taking support from the Hitler government. And the Hitler government was bragging in their internal memos about how they were in great communication with those folks. So it really was very powerful interests arrayed against Roosevelt in a completely hysterical way. Yeah. And yet, through all these different ways of fighting it, Americans did the right thing and beat them back. But that story needs to be told. We need to know what those tactics were and how those people worked.
100%. Ultra is everyone. You really will become addicted to it. But you know what? My secret plan is essentially to create a hostage situation where I never let Rachel Maddow leave. I let her stay with me until the end of the show. So I'm going to ask you, Rachel, please, can I just keep you for one quick commercial break and just ask you one question? It's not on Ultra, but it's on another thing that's really important. Can you stay for like 2 minutes?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Hostage situation fully implemented. Stay right there, everybody. We'll be right back.